Okay. Good morning. How's it going? Right, gents?
Morning.
Good.
Morning. It's a wet November morning. How are we all doing?
Good.
Survived Halloween and everything's good to go.
I know.
Yeah.
Dreading the impending Christmasification of everything coming up.
I know. December 1st, I start on the Malibu and I don't stop.
Wow.
For one whole month. Party will.
We're at this time of season, so we thought we'd start talking about what we do at this time of season, right?
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Preserving. One of my favorite things to talk about.
Let's preserve.
And we have a good friend back to visit with us today.
It's a secret, though. We're going to reveal it. Yeah, we're going to reveal it in a second. Right after this.
Do you ever wonder where your food comes from? That's what got us started on this adventure.
In each episode, we ask experts to weigh in on the food topics that matter to you, from growers to producers to chefs.
And I challenge John, Darren, and you to learn more about your food and the stories behind it. From our hub on Vancouver Island in the beautiful Comox Valley, join us as we explore our edible valley. And a very good day to you. This is the Edible Valley Podcast, episode 196. Oh, we're getting there. I'm William. I'm the producer.
I'm Chef Jonathan Fraser.
And I'm Darren Howlett, preserver enthusiast. I don't know, preservation enthusiast.
You're not sounding very enthusiastic about that. Actually.
We'll see Yeah, we'll see where I'm at the end of the episode.
Did you say Darren Howlett? You pronounce your own name wrong.
No, I said my name right. Thank
All
you.
right,
Though.
well, anyone can go back and listen to that. So, how's your week been?
Good. Yeah, John and I have been talking about doing a preserving episode for quite some time, and it just seemed topical because I just wrote an article for the CV Collective magazine about about smoking and pickling, and it seems to be on the top of my mind. So
wait, you write for the CV Collective?
What? Me? Yeah, on occasion.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah. But then, stars aligned. The perfect guest came along for just such a topic.
Nice. Do you, when you're writing these articles, do you learn while you're writing them, or are you doing kind of research? That's great.
Yeah, because I'm talking out of experience for the most part, and then I'm like, you know what? I need to double check this, or I need to double check that before I go and write that down as
so I get text messages. John.
Sometimes. I'm like, what about this?
What about this? Can
this
I
is
do
right.
this?
Yeah.
Can you do this? Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, Halloween. So Halloween is almost. I was reading an article today saying that Halloween for kids is becoming a more significant holiday than Christmas.
What?
Yeah, which is. But I mean, you just look at it. Everyone, people.
I suppose, the candy. I guess then the costuming. I don't know.
Yeah, another sugar.
Well, we're going to
festival,
teach you
festival of
how
sugar.
to preserve your candy.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
No, please don't.
Smoking and pickling candy.
So, without further ado, we're not even going to say a guest because, he never really left our hearts. It's a bit weird thing to say about someone I just met, actually. Let's do a little intro, Mr. John.
Well, we have the original host of the Edible Valley podcast who mysteriously slipped away up north to the Haida Gwaii to start a life of building arrows and living the outdoor life, I guess. We have Blaine Prowse with us again today.
Hey everyone, good
Hey,
to be here.
what's up?
Thanks for the invite.
You still remember how to talk?
Barely. I
So-
traveled 36 hours to be here for this interview, so I hope it goes well.
You did. Holy smokes.
I love that we live in a place that it can take 36 hours to travel like a couple of hundred miles.
Yeah.
No, I guess it's more like a couple of hundred miles, but it's
Yeah,
that's
24
great.
hours on a BC Ferries
Good
total
Lord.
or so ish, 24-ish hours.
I can barely stand the hour and a half for the usual trip over to the mainland, but
You get a stateroom though, so you can kind of hide away, which is
nice.
And the boat's this time of the year it's not busy at all, so
Wow.
it's not crammed full of people.
Yeah.
That's good.
So Haida Gwaii are the set of islands to the north of Vancouver Island. They're quite a bit, aren't they? They're like a couple of hundred miles up from Vancouver Island.
Yeah,
are they?
I don't know exactly how far, but
It's a way.
it's a fair distance up there, you bet.
So one thing I love about meeting new people is because they introduce you to new things. And I said, I've come from the UK. I have my own circle of friends, and you'd be like, "What do you do?" I'm a barman, or I serve tables. I said to Blaine, "What do you do?" And he said, "I make arrows."
Yeah.
And it's like, boom, a new world.
Yeah.
Can you, I mean, this is not about this, but I really want to know, what is building arrows about?
Well, it's mostly art, essentially. Like I take a dowel, which is made out of Sitka spruce, which is from Haida Gwaii, my friend up there, and my neighbor. He makes the dowels, the shafts, and I take them and I paint them and I finish them, make them waterproof, put feathers on them and points on them, and send them all over the world, really.
Yeah. And
Mostly North America, but...
And you said there's a real interest in them in like the Middle East, like a long history of using arrows.
Yeah, well, essentially worldwide, archery is...
Really?
Yeah, it's part of our history as man.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of advanced our species from throwing rocks and spears to once we learned that we could store energy in the limbs of a bow and launch a projectile, it gave us a huge advantage hunting-wise.
Right.
Wow.
And in warfare as well. So...
And despite the fact that they are art, like you are putting a lot of artistry into them in your craft.
Yeah.
You're making fully functional arrows.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. People say, "Oh, they're too pretty to shoot." I'm like, nonsense. That's what they're made for. Yeah. Shoot them suckers. I don't want them sitting on your wall.
And of course, shooting something with it to eat it, and there we go. There's Edible Valley food.
Yeah,
There's the
absolutely.
connection.
Well, absolutely.
Well, I
And-
think that brings us right back to what we want to do is when you're out there hunting,
Yeah. What
what do you do
preservation
with
methods?
this? How do you take care of a deer, an elk, whatever you're getting out there?
Yep.
How do you preserve it? And there's a bunch of methods, and I thought what would be more fun than to talk about it, and I figured
Yeah.
if we're talking about this, who better to talk to than with Blaine, because I know he's
Yeah.
got a world of knowledge, because I know the two of us have spent a lot of time over the years butchering and canning and doing
Right.
all sorts of fun things with food.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great jumping off point. I mean, I've been amazed at the amount of types of preservation there is available. It's not just chuck it in a can or stick it in the fridge like I'm kind of used to. So let's quickly go around and see what our favourite preservation methods are. Mr. John, favourite preservation method and the reason why.
Well, I'm kind of going a little cooking dorky on here because I've just found out, well, I haven't just found out about it, but I'm really interested in freeze drying.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
This is pretty much what's been getting me going on this. And I'm just thinking from a culinary aspect of it and a preserving aspect of it that this is a pretty crazy thing. Now it's super expensive. And so if you want to help promote the Edible Valley podcast, it would actually help me go towards buying a
I just like the notion. I like the idea that you can take a product like you're talking about, and it's not just about reconstituting it for later use. I think that there's something there that if you throw in seasonings and what have you, that when you do reconstitute it, you're going to get stronger flavor. You're going to get more permeated flavor throughout. I want to explore that aspect. I'm waiting for you to get this.
I'm
'cause I
not
wanna
saying
explore
this
that.
is like the end. This is like the best way of preserving because I think there's all sorts of great preserving ways. But that's where I'm going with right now.
Okay.
Sure.
Darren,
Yeah,
favourite methods.
I would have to say, honestly, I'm all over the place, just like everybody else, as far as different times I'm going for different things. But right now, pickling. I'm on a pickling kick.
Okay.
I'm really appreciating the acidic balance,
Great.
to a lot of dishes that I make. I'm finding new things to pickle.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. And Blaine.
Well, honestly, I do all of those. Like, no, they don't freeze dry, but I've done almost every kind of preservation method. But honestly, my favorite is freezing. 'Cause
Yeah?
it's
Okay.
the simplest.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's quick. And when you're dealing, like, where we're at, we go fishing and we come home with a pile of salmon, or we get a couple of deer. You can't spend a lot of time farting around because you just like, I need to get this dealt with quickly. So, butcher paper for the land critters and vacuum sealing for the sea creatures and in the freezer. And the nice thing about that is it can be frozen. If you want to pull it out at a later date and then make jerky, can the salmon, smoke the salmon, make biltong, whatever you want to do, that food is preserved frozen. It's going to stay that way until you either cook it as it is or you pull it out and do something else with it.
So essentially freezes time It just
It's just a quick way to you know, because we're not up there. We're harvesting food off the land. That's our grocery store, is the land.
yeah.
Not, you know, if you live somewhere where you're allowed to shoot, say, 1 deer per season, or you catch 1 salmon and you take a lot of time with that fish and do all the things with it as it's fresh, that's great. But when you have a mountain of it all at one time, you know,
Right.
you have a family of 3 people, you're allowed 2 springs each spring's 20 pounds, ends up being a lot of meat. You're not going to spend days processing that. Generally, it's just get it in the freezer, and then we can make a plan after.
Okay. So sticking with freezing.
Well, let's do some of the pros and cons of freezing. Like, I know Blaine's got the
Yeah.
pro there that it's
Yeah, yeah.
easy, instant. I want to. What are other pros of it that you guys have?
Well, it's
easy.
dead. Yeah, mostly it's easy and foolproof as long as
Right.
you're doing
Foolproof is good.
good job of wrapping.
Yeah.
Then your food is not going to freeze or burn.
Right.
It will eventually, because it just dries out. But
Yeah.
you know, you got a good, especially with red meat. Like, you're at least a year, probably a year and a half, and and even then, if you get a little freezer burn, you just trim it off.
Yeah.
It's fine.
No, but I think that's worth saying too, is that the fact that it's relatively foolproof, because most of these other techniques, not all, but most of them, all do have, you know, a bit of skill is involved, and there's when it comes to freezing. You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I'll bring up some points that I
Sure.
like. I like the fact that it's quick and easy, but the cons is it doesn't last forever. It doesn't kill all the bacteria. It doesn't it just slows
Stops.
down the breakdown of your food. So as you're saying, like, wrapping it well, like a vacuum sealer is an amazing tool when it comes to freezing. It's a little bit more extra work and stuff like that, but you can double the life, I think, of your.
Also, I guess to backtrack what I did say, I think there is a bit of need for knowledge, because I think that a con, but also a pro sometimes, freezing meats can alter texture, and you can use that to or against your favor.
Oh, there's a huge difference between fresh halibut and frozen halibut.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'm just, sometimes you can use that to your advantage, but sometimes, if you aren't aware and you just go throwing things in the freezer thinking you're just getting a little extra time, you should be aware.
What's the difference between freeze drying and freezing? As the layman, it might be no different.
Yeah, John.
So
John
we're
can
going
tell you.
into a whole thing. Well, with freeze drying is you're freezing it, but you're sucking the moisture out of it. So you're, as Will loses his pen.
So I left my pen in my hair. And I couldn't.
So basically what you're doing is you're freezing it down to a very low temperature, and then you're sucking the moisture out of it. And so the moisture goes from a solid to a gas form, so it keeps the texture, keeps the brilliance of it. Whereas freezing is a slower process of getting to it. So it's kind of like you can lose the perfections
Right.
you lose the texture of it as well, because it like, if you're thinking about berries or vegetables, you know, they kind of break down a little bit when they freeze. Like, if you think about fresh peas, like when you throw them in the freezer,
Well, yeah,
they're
because the
soft
water in it is crystallizing, and it's damaging the cell structure.
Yeah.
And that can be helpful or detrimental.
And this
depending on what
brings
you're
me
doing.
to a great technique is IQFing, which is something that probably most people don't think about. But like with your frozen berries and stuff like that, instead of throwing all your berries into a bag and then throwing them in the freezer, and then you pull it out, you've got a brick of berries, right?
Right.
They've all mushed in that. If you throw them on a sheet pan,
Yeah.
and then throw them in there individually, they'll freeze as individual pieces. And you can
That's
do
right.
this with anything. With, like, if you get a bunch of extra meat of some sort, you can cut it down and put it into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Freeze it on a tray and then transfer it into a bag, and that gives you a little bit of extra life.
Yeah, I do that with blueberries and blackberries. You freeze them on a tray, non-clustered, each getting space, and then once they're all fully frozen, then throw them in a bag.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow.
I have one more drawback to freezing:
sure.
power.
Oh yeah, constant power drain.
And I could say that, it's a constant power drain. It's always on your hydro bill. And, you know, if someone kicks that power, you know, your
Time is running out.
nothing is worse than a deep freeze the plug has been out for a week.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that's that.
I'm not going to
we're
tell you the
nervous of that
story,
right now.
but I have told the story many times when Brian and I came back from a festival making sushi, and we forgot about chicken thighs in the freezer that no longer had power for 2 weeks.
Barf.
Yeah. Barf. Anywho, yeah, let's get on to another topic, or another subject.
Well, I want to talk now. And
Sure.
we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to be
Let's
a
do
bit
it.
snappy. But pickling. Your
Pickling.
favorite, Darren.
Yeah, I like pickling. I think that pickling is one of the greatest ways for preservation to have a sort of a gamut of flavors you can introduce. I think that all the other preservation forms, most of them have, smoking. You're definitely bringing in a flavor of smoke or what have you. But with pickling, literally the world is your oyster. You can pickle anything within reason, but you can impart any flavor, and that's what I like. I like experimenting with what you can do with flavor to the pickling. Yes.
Wow.
So with
And I find it super easy. People find it very daunting. Pickling, you don't have to get out, 80 jars and go get a gross lot of this or that. I do pickling every day. Like I'll pickle something not every day, but a couple times a week. Maybe it's 1 jar, maybe it's 3 jars.
But let's talk about
Yeah.
the key ingredients you need for
Sure.
pickling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you need for pickling?
Generally, I use a bit of sugar, but primarily you need salt and vinegar, and then water.
Yeah, and then you just add your seasonings as
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So,
One other thing about pickling that's really cool is it allows you to can vegetables without needing a pressure canner.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, any non-acidic food you need to pressure can. So if you were to can carrots without pickling them, they need to be pressure canned. But you put that vinegar in, it acidifies it. Boom, hot water bath, way quicker, 10 minutes or so, and they're
Yeah.
done. Actually, a lot of times you don't even have to can them. You can just put them in jars with hot brine; they'll seal themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a lower entry to barrier to entry to canning if you're not up for doing pressure canning, because pressure canning can be a little intimidating to some people.
Absolutely. And expensive. You got to buy the right equipment.
Yeah, I mean the canner's an investment. If you get a good one, it's going to last you and your children forever, but it's still $400 or $500 investment.
That's
And for
interesting.
anybody that's watching this on YouTube and later, you can see right behind me is my pressure canner, and you need the pressure cooker rather. And you need that gauge. You need the heavy duty sealing for pressure canning, just because if you can't fool around with it, because you can create. That's where you create botulism. Really, is because you're not using a brine in that case.
so we're kind of slipping into
Sure. Yeah, we're
into
sort of talking
canning
about
here.
two things there.
I did have one thing about pickling.
Yeah,
now,
let's talk
and,
about
and
it.
just this was my question, and it just occurred to me: is fermenting, does that fall under pickling?
No.
It's different. Fermenting is preserving food using bacteria,
Right.
and that makes it shelf stable.
Yeah, which I just realized through my list here I have of great ways of preserving. We
Yeah.
didn't talk about fermenting.
So,
'cause
yeah.
it's not on the list here.
If you, instead of doing a dill pickle with vinegar and salt to make a dill pickle fermented, you just use chlorine-free water, because you can't have chlorine because it kills the bacteria or slows
Right.
the bacteria. So you want spring water or filtered water and salt, and you put the pickles in, you put them in a vessel, make sure all the pickles are under the water, and let nature take its course. And it takes a week-ish, but it depends on the temperature. If it's cooler, it takes longer. If it's warmer, it goes faster. And those suckers, they will ferment, and the lactobacillus bacteria will sour them. And when I ferment things, I don't leave them out. I like to have them in the fridge, or you want to have them somewhere cool, like in a crawl space or a basement.
Yeah, yeah.
Root cellar, as we were talking about before.
Which we'll get to, yeah.
So that's the traditional way of preserving vegetables for thousands of years, is put them in a crock. A stone crock generally was what they'd use in the olden days. You don't want to use metal. You want to use glass or stone, and put them up that way.
You can get away with plastic nowadays too. If it's not the
Yeah, I
same,
just
but it
rather.
feels-
I like
Yeah.
glass,
Yeah,
glass
yeah.
or stone.
No, I'm with you on that, but
yeah.
I know I've done it with in
Yeah, you
big
can-
when you're doing big batches in plastic buckets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Really
Yeah.
clean.
But I mean, I think the two it stands, or it's worth mentioning maybe. I mean, I think maybe our definition now, I think that if you ferment something, I don't know if you'd really call that preservation anymore, because you're turning out that product into something else, aren't you?
Kind of, yeah. In
Yeah,
some
Maybe that's why
ways.
it's not on our list.
Yeah, maybe.
You're
Yeah.
taking cabbage. Cabbage is turning into sauerkraut, but it's
Yeah.
still preserved cabbage. But you could make sauerkraut with white wine vinegar,
Right.
and you can buy it in the store on the shelf with all the relishes and everything, and it's called sauerkraut, but it's not
Right.
traditionally fermented
fermented
sauerkraut,
sauerkraut.
because you can't seal sauerkraut in a jar because that would kill all the bacteria. So it defeats the purpose. So they use vinegar to mimic the taste, but
Right.
it's not the same.
That's why I hate sauerkraut on the shelf.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Homemade
actually,
sauerkraut's
what-
way better.
Yeah, it's super good.
Yeah.
Same with kimchi. You buy a kimchi that's fermented, traditionally made. It's delicious.
That's why we make our own at work because
Yeah.
of that. Because
Yeah.
it gives it an extra different flavor to it. You know?
And it
Like
has the
it's a-
terroir of where you are, because it's using the bacteria and the yeast from the air where you're making it.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Wow. But yeah, to wrap up canning or wrap up pickling, I would say, not that we're setting out to do this, but I would say that that's a fairly easy one as well for people that are just starting to become comfortable with pickling or preserving. I would say that pickling is sort of the next tier, the next level, where it's like, you can tackle that.
And did we cover canning completely?
I think we should go back on
Yeah.
canning because I think it's a great way of doing taking care of
Yep.
pickling, taking care of
Yeah.
well,
You
not
want me to-
fermented.
Well,
'cause-
and then it's another, again, my big thing. It's another way of introducing flavor and creating flavor that doesn't exist before it. But I haven't done a lot of canning. It's not for me to speak on for sure.
I've done a ton of it.
you're right.
I've done a ton of it. So for me, canning is a way to, just a straight up preservation method. I don't think of it as far as recipes and making flavors. I think of it as, we got a pile of something and we want to put it up for the winter.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I come at all this from a preparedness standpoint of, I want to make sure I have food for my family in case of supply chain issues, which we're all aware of right now. Also living on islands, which I've always done. Ferries get canceled, this and that. Vancouver Island's not so bad for it, but Haida Gwaii definitely.
You're not getting avocados up there.
We definitely are. But if the ferry doesn't run for a week, then suddenly there's no milk on the shelves and certain
Right.
things dry up. So that's where I come at it from. So, when it's apple season, we'll go pick 5 or 6 bags of apples and make applesauce, and it's in the pantry.
Yeah.
We eat it, but we don't devour it. It's just there. And same with chanterelle mushrooms. We pick a lot of those, and we put those up. That's a pressure canning thing again, because
Really?
because they're non-acidic.
Yeah.
So you could pickle them, but we just can them, pressure canned.
Nice.
Chanterelles are up. Dump that into a chili, a stew, whatever you want.
That's what we should talk a little bit about between pressure canning and just regular canning.
Yeah,
because
well,
there's a bit of a
like I
difference
mentioned before, it's non-acidic things need to be pressure canned.
Yeah.
So any meat, any fish, mushrooms, and vegetables all need to be pressure canned. If you're doing fruit or pickled things, they can be just water bath canned, which is a big pot full of boiling water, and you submerge the jar in the boiling water, and the product inside the jar will get up to boil, and that vents out any of the air, and that's creates the vacuum inside the jar, which is what seals it.
Not that I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent. I had a friend that used to do their own like bolognese sauce, and it shelf stable. And there's the tomato acidic enough, or
Yep.
because the meat? Oh, it is.
It's the tomatoes. The
Yeah.
tomatoes are acidic enough that
Nice.
I think you have to watch that one. With,
Yeah,
with tomato sauce is
In-
that tomato sauce I think should be pressure canned if I remember, just because you add extra things so it brings the acidity level down.
Yeah.
Compared to if you just do whole tomatoes, which you can get away without pressure canning
Yeah.
because they have the acidity in them.
Well, this
Okay,
is definitely a topic that I'd love to learn more
We
about.
could talk about
and I
canning
will,
for
Yeah, I
days.
will be researching this as soon as we stop. I'm sure.
Well, and we did a great canning episode with Comox Valley Canning Company.
There you go.
Got it right.
Pull
Okay.
that one out of your hat.
There's a Comox Valley everything company.
Yeah. So what else you got on your little list there for
Yeah,
us, Will?
absolutely. I feel bad having to push this along because this is
It's all
really,
right.
really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna chuck this one at you. Sun drying.
Yeah. Sun drying, I don't do much of it. I would assume that you probably, out of all of us, do some sun
the only
drying.
thing I've really sun dried is herbs.
Yeah.
Just put them out on a sheet pan on a drying rack out in the sun. I would love to do some sun dried salmon up north, but the problem is we don't always get super sunny weather for a long period of time. I know my grandpa, when he used to make his smoked salmon, he would lay it on a sheet of plywood, put the brine on it, put it at an angle so that the moisture would run out of the fish, and just leave it out in the sun for a few hours. That's how he'd brine it, and then he'd smoked it.
Wow.
Get rid of
That's
that
something I
moisture,
definitely want to do.
Yeah.
I was
I
going to
know-
go back to herbs actually, because that's what we used to do a lot with the ice cream shop for our fresh herbs and stuff like that. Is we had a really good herb garden in the backyard.
Yep.
So we would actually take the screens from the window screens.
Oh,
we would
yeah.
take those and just spread out all your herbs. So if you've got a huge amount of herbs in there, and
Yeah.
you know, herbs are expensive when you go to the grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
You just clip all your rosemary, throw it on a tray, sit it out in the sun where the air can circulate around
Yeah.
it, dries up really quick, and there you go. You got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You can
I
save it up.
think if we had more consistent sun here, or more intense sun here,
But
it might be
even
more of a
you can-
valid.
You can
thing, but-
throw that by the fireplace. In the,
Yeah.
You know, like that's a great drying
Yeah.
spot. It's not just the sun, but it's
Right.
that air circulating around it.
Yeah.
So-
For sure. But yeah, I would say in that, the only other thing I would say there is that it's generally your delicate things. You're not looking to do, sun dried like whole onions or something. You know what I mean? You've got to be reasonable about it, what you're actually going to be getting sun dried, which is,
Yeah, sun-dried tomatoes, which are more delicate, I guess.
which are
that's-
usually dehydrated.
yeah.
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 You could
But
also.
yeah, I mean, let's talk about dehydrating because that's sort of the next step, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
moisture removing. I just bought a dehydrator the other day that I've wanted one for years, and I don't know where the barrier was, but I finally bought a dehydrator and I'm quite enjoying it. But for me, I'm not about preservation. I'm starting to feel like I'm living in a bit of a lap of luxury when I'm talking to Blaine here, because his is more about necessity and mine's more about exploring flavor combinations, But so that's what I started doing is I tried the dehydrator out a little bit here and there, and then now just to get a feel for it. And now I'm like, what happens if I spice this orange before I dehydrate it? The slices. Or what happens if I sprinkle a little herb on these tomatoes before I dehydrate them? Like just starting to fool around, just seeing what products I can come up with. Not when I say products, I mean food, kitchen products, but
Well, I was going to go with dehydrating because it connects back to that freeze drying. Because
Yeah.
it's along the same process. The only thing is you're using heat
Right.
to get rid of the moisture. So that's where you're caramelizing the whatever you're putting in there. So that's why you get a little bit more of a sweeter. That's why sun-dried tomatoes are got
Right.
that sweet flavor to them. Or you dehydrate oranges. You can do them with the skin on because the bitterness of the skin or the pulpy bit, not the pulpy bit, sorry, what's
the pith.
The pith.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The
I was like,
rind.
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, that goes away a bit with in the dehydrator.
Yeah.
And if you want to make them even sweeter, you dust them with a little bit of sugar.
Yeah.
And you get an even sweeter, or drop them in simple syrup and then throw them on there. Whereas I know Blaine used to make really great jerky.
Yeah, we still do.
Yeah.
You came in eating jerky. Was that
Yeah,
of your
it
own
was
design?
a piece of liver jerky actually.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, we started making liver jerky because we've had so many deer. We just put all the liver in the freezer,
Gotta figure out how to use.
and it's so delicious and so nutritious for us that we're trying to just do different things with it. So that's one of the things that we thought we better bring liver down with us so we can keep that going in our system
Right.
for the vitamins and nutrients in that. So yeah,
Cool.
so we dehydrated some liver and it's turned out really well.
That's fantastic.
All right, so I know we could talk about this. I've
Well, I
got to
have
be
one
the...
more thing.
Go
for-
on then.
For people who, and I just got to get this one out, for people who want to learn about dehydrating and get into it, if you get a dehydrator, get one with a fan.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
that? Why is that?
Well, because if not, you're doing a constant rotating of things. Like you do it on thin trays, right? And
Oh, yeah.
The trick is having it very thin so it dries quickly. So without a fan, it just sits there. So it's circulating that air and pushing the moisture away speeds up the process and makes a much nicer product. So
Yeah.
All right, so not a million miles away, smoking.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of is. By process, I think that that's, again, what John was talking about with the freeze drying and what have you. You're still trying to find ways to reduce the amount of moisture you've got in the product for safekeeping or for long-term keeping. But I find I used to be really into smoking, and I would smoke. I got into, actually, I smoke white beans and then make a chili out of them, and you get this super smoky bean chili that can still be vegetarian, which I quite liked. But yeah, I kind of overdid it with smoking, and I haven't really touched my smoker in like a year.
Well, there's so many varieties with smoking because
Yeah.
there's like, first of all, what you're using as a product. So are you doing a meat, vegetable, whatever, like how you're going to use that to get your flavor or what you're using to initiate your flavor to. And then you can talk about your woods because there's, I was just thinking like hickory, apple, maple. You can use all
Absolutely,
these different...
and people will say, "Oh, what's the difference?" There's a huge difference between using, say, hickory or cherry wood. You can taste it immediately, and but then also what you do with your brine, right?
Oh, exactly.
There's tons of different.
Whether you brine it, whether you rub it, what do you do with it? Yeah, I got into it when I got the electric smoker. When I was working at the Atlas there, and that was like, it was just heaven to me, like just smoking there, like it was so easy. And like we bring in like 6 or 7 briskets and throw it in there, and it was like, do you wrap it, do you unwrap it, like how do you infuse that flavor in there? And some of the tricks I got into were just like using coarser salts, like a lot of places, barbecue places, were like, use seasoning salt, and I realized like no, you use coarse salt because that salt crystal picks up more of that smoky flavor, and that's another great thing to smoke is just salt. Like,
Those details make
When
a
you used
difference.
I remember that there would be times when you guys were up on a low setting smoking just a bunch of cheeses, right?
Like smoked cheese is beautiful.
Absolutely,
right? Like,
but yeah, there's a lot you can do with a home smoker. I mean,
and it kills bacteria. It slows down the process. I mean, we live in smoked salmon country.
it's true.
I mean, this area was built on smoked salmon as a preserving. I don't think our local indigenous people would have survived without the salmon,
Right.
and without the ability to smoke it, right?
Yep.
So,
Salt, air dried, aired and smoked to put it up for the winter.
And salting. Moving on to another one now. Salting.
Sure, yeah, it's kind of related, sort of. I mean,
So salting it, that's just a preserving method, right? Like we're talking
Salt curing.
gravlax, salt curing.
yeah.
I haven't done a lot of this in my...
No.
I've made a lot
actually-
of locks. But
Yeah,
that's-
I used to be married to a Swede, and her mom taught me how to make gravlax, and that's really the extent of salt curing that I do, which is, you literally just pack it full of salt to draw out as much moisture as you can at first, and then you rinse it, and then your second salt pack is there just essentially to keep it all in, what you've got left, and make it sort of go throughout. But yeah, gravlax is fantastic, which is cold smoked salmon, which is if people don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Gravlax. But yeah.
It's neat actually going through all these processes. I'm just thinking about the actual science behind it.
Yeah.
Is that like with salting, you're getting rid of the moisture, so bacteria has nothing to grow in.
Right.
In canning, you're getting rid of the air, so
Right.
the bacteria has nothing to breathe.
Right.
So you're basically trying to remove.
Every which way is a way of trying to remove bacterial interference.
Exactly. Stop them from growing.
The thing that one more thing about salt curing that I do is biltong, which is kind of like jerky, but you don't use a dehydrator.
Oh yeah.
So you take your meat and you cut it into strips, and then you dip it in apple cider vinegar. That's your first sort of bacterial removal process. Right. And then I put it on sheet pans with on a cooling rack so the air can move around it, and I sprinkle coarse salt on it and pepper, which the coarse salt helps the moisture. The pepper helps with keeping flies off of it.
Oh, interesting.
And then you just set it up in a warm spot, like above your kitchen cabinets, for a week. I rotate it after about 2 or 3 days. I flip all the pieces on the tray.
Yeah.
And it dries it out, and it's
Wow.
groovy. It's really good stuff.
That's amazing.
That's a South African technique for preserving bushmeat, essentially.
That's awesome.
All right, so this is going to be a bit more of a quick fire because we've only got a couple of minutes. But root cellar.
Yeah.
Well, I thought we could go to jams and jellies first because I think the root cellar is where it all ends up at the end.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
yeah, go for it. We can do that.
Okay.
Let's go jams and jellies.
Salt, sugar, not
It's
salt.
just sugar. Yeah, everything that we've talked about before is primarily salt and acidification, and sugar. Like when we're talking about jams and jellies, you're talking about just an overwhelming amount of sugar to use.
But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
No, you're right.
You can make a not super sweet jam, but you got to get that oxygen out of there again. So either you're canning it, or as people used to do, is pour wax on the top, and then just screw a lid on it, and you're good to go. As long as all that oxygen there's no oxygen getting into that jar, that fruit will last a long time.
It also having the pectin in there and using fruits that have high
Yeah.
pectin
Yeah.
in it. Like we've been doing quince lately.
Yeah.
At work, we just got it, and it's really neat to do a jelly out of that because we make the Membrosa. I hope I said that right. And then we skim off the top of it, and it's instant. It's an instant jelly. Like it's
Yeah.
already got that pectin in it. It's super, and it's beautiful, sweet.
Yeah.
And we're using it on cheese trays with meat trays. It's just great. So
Yeah. Okay. And then the one the Will wanted to know more about the root
Yeah.
cellar. So
Will's never had a root cellar.
yeah, I mean, root cellar to me implies essentially just a colder, traditionally lower section of the house because there it's easier to keep colder, where you store things, and you could literally store all your root vegetables to get extra life out of them, months of extra life. Or whereas if you bought a bag of potatoes and leave them in your humid, constantly temperature changing kitchen, your potatoes are only going to last for a few weeks to a month. But if you have a root cellar, you can probably get a good 3-4 months out of your potatoes because you're temperature controlling. So it's not refrigerating, because refrigeration sort of seems to add a bit of moisture, or moisture is collected and redistributed. Root cellar is sort of cold but without moisture.
And dark.
In dark, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's your key, is like you're keeping the temperature low and you're keeping it dark. So it's not like on your sunny days, the warm summer, it's not that heat. Like
Right.
when you're underground, the temperature doesn't rise that much.
Yeah.
So you've got that controlled area,
And that's why sometimes, like, even if you don't have a root cellar in your house, you can still do the same preservation methods with a well-chosen closet or a well-chosen cupboard, that is not going to get light. It's not affected by heat changes, what have you.
as a kid, we used to use the crawl space.
Yeah.
We had a great little entranceway into our crawl space, and we just had shelves in there.
Same,
and that's
yeah.
where all the potatoes would go. That's where all the,
Yeah.
a lot of the canned goods, and it was there kind of that, the pantry, all that kind of stuff went in there. And we just, as it came along, and there was little things like, like going down and potatoes when they start to sprout, just knocking those sprouts out, and they last
Yeah.
a little bit longer. So you can have 50, 100 pounds of potatoes down there, and they're going to last. So you just got to take a little time and take care of them.
But yeah, a lot of the preservation methods we already touched on there, actually you can extend their life a little bit more by just storing them in the root cellar versus storing them in your kitchen or storing them wherever, instead of readily accessible. Just taking that little extra time to store them in a proper environment, they'll get much longer.
Well, I
life
think
out of them.
that's another one that you have to remove for bacteria likes light.
Yeah.
Things grow in light. So
Yeah.
if you can remove that from them. So yeah, what have we learned from this? Light.
Yep.
Light, moisture,
And oxygen.
Oxygen. You get rid of
Remove those, and you've already started preserving your food.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've actually fired through 10 in around 30 minutes, which I think is amazing, seeing as you could do easily one episode for each type. Maybe that is an idea
Challenge
for us.
accepted.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely. I genuinely think it would be really, really interesting.
So Blaine, you can
yeah.
come back. It's only 36 hours. Right?
I'll come back next week.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, and anyone out there, help support our Patreon and keep this podcast going, and maybe we can help Blaine with a ticket to come down and visit
Yeah.
us again.
Actually,
yeah.
as for that, to talk about that, if anybody has any questions about preservation methods, by all means, you have a chef here at your disposal. Fire us some questions, and we can help out with your further preservation queries.
And if anyone out there has some favorite preserving methods and things that they like to preserve, send it to us. We love to hear stuff from you and find out what you're doing with food, especially in your own edible valley, right? There's lots going on out there.
Cheers. So this has been episode 196.
Fantastic.
Getting towards 200 gradually.
You better do something special for 200.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. You just put that on me, but yeah.
I'm just putting it on your lap. No. But yeah, it's been great having you back, Blaine. Always so
cheers.
fun when you come back on.
Yeah, it
You're
was awesome.
You're a fountain of knowledge. Love having you
Yeah,
on.
you know your stuff. That's for sure. Pretty impressive.
Yep, self-taught. Lots of mistakes. And if you guys want to check out my arrow work, I'm on at Stumpstalker.
Stump
Stump Stalker.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Perfect stuff. Well, thank you very much then, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on preservation, and we will see you next week. Cheers.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Edible Valley podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks goes to the local businesses that help support our podcast. They make it possible for us to showcase your local food community. We'd love you to follow us on your preferred social media at Edible Valley, where you can check out our blog, find recipes and tips, behind the scenes, and of course keep a lookout for where we are going to turn up next in your Edible Valley.
And then in the intro, I'm going to mention the special guest, but I'm not going to.
Sure.
Okay, right, let's go. What is it? What episode is it? Okay.
196.
And this has been an Edible Valley production.
Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. Okay, ready again?